Horse racing's biggest winners are also its biggest cheaters. What you're about to discover will make you question every race you've ever watched. In 2007, racing officials made a discovery that shocked even the most experienced investigators. Hidden in trainer Patrick Biancone's Kentucky barn, they found something that didn't belong anywhere near a racehorse: cobra venom. Biancone wasn't using the venom to make his horses run faster, he was using it as a painkiller, a deadly illegal painkiller that could mask injuries no horse should ever race with. While other trainers used legal medications, Biancone had turned to one of nature's most dangerous toxins. The venom worked by numbing pain so completely that injured horses couldn't feel their own suffering. Broken bones, torn muscles, damaged joints, none of it mattered anymore. The horses would run through injuries that should have stopped them immediately. When officials confronted Biancone, he couldn't explain why cobra venom was in his possession. There was no medical reason, no legal purpose, just a trainer who had decided that winning races was worth risking his horses' lives. Biancone received a 1-year suspension, but the damage went deeper than anyone realized. How many races had been won by horses that were secretly injured? How many animals had suffered in silence because they couldn't feel their own pain? Rumors say other trainers like Rick Dutro had similar methods: hidden syringes, mysterious cocktails, substances that turned racing into a dangerous game. But Biancone's cobra venom proved that some people would use anything to gain an advantage, no matter how deadly the consequences. But drugs were just the beginning. Some people took cheating to a level that shocked even the most corrupt insiders. In 1984, a horse named Fine Cotton was supposed to run in a race at Eagle Farm in Australia. But the horse that crossed the finish line first wasn't Fine Cotton at all. It was a completely different animal. Ring-in scandals had happened before, but never this boldly. The real Fine Cotton was a slow, beaten-down horse that couldn't win against amateur riders. So the conspirators found Bold Personality, a much faster horse that looked almost identical. Almost. On race day, they painted white markings on Bold Personality to match Fine Cotton's appearance. They even glued fake hair to cover up distinctive marks. The plan was perfect, except they weren't as careful as they thought. When the horse walked onto the track, racing officials and rival trainers immediately knew something was wrong. The markings looked fresh and artificial. The horse's build seemed different. Even the way it moved didn't match Fine Cotton's usual gait. But the real red flag was the betting. Mysterious money was pouring in on Fine Cotton from people who normally never bet on such a hopeless horse. The odds were shifting in ways that made no sense. Bold Personality won easily, paying out huge odds to the few people who knew about the switch. But even before the race ended, officials were already planning their investigation. The scandal exploded across Australian racing. Multiple people went to prison. The betting public lost trust that lasted for years. And it proved that some people would risk everything to steal a single race, even when their deception was obvious to anyone paying attention. The worst scandals aren't always about cheating. Sometimes they're about murder. In 1932, Phar Lap was the most famous horse in the world. The Australian champion had won 37 out of 51 races and captured hearts across 2 continents. When he traveled to North America for one final race, thousands of people came to watch him train in California. Phar Lap's big American debut was at the Agua Caliente Racetrack in Tijuana, Mexico. He won easily, dominating horses that were supposed to be his equals. He was set to earn millions in future races. But 16 days later, he was dead. The horse collapsed suddenly at his California stable. Within hours, his body started shutting down. Veterinarians had never seen anything like it. His stomach was burning from the inside. His breathing became desperate gasps. Then he was gone. Officials claimed it was colic, a natural death. But the symptoms didn't match any known horse illness. Phar Lap's trainer suspected poison immediately. So did the stable workers who had watched him die in agony. After his death, Phar Lap's hide, skeleton, and heart were preserved and split between museums in Australia and New Zealand. For decades, the mystery remained unsolved, but in 2006, scientists finally tested hair samples that had been saved from Phar Lap's mane. The results were shocking. Phar Lap had been killed by a massive dose of arsenic. Someone had deliberately poisoned the most beloved horse in racing history. The murder had been covered up for over 70 years. Nobody was ever charged. The killer's identity died with them. But Phar Lap's death proved that in horse racing, even legends aren't safe from the people who profit from their destruction. In 2020, the FBI made arrests that shook horse racing to its core. This wasn't about one trainer. This was a massive doping conspiracy poisoning the entire sport. Jason Servis trained maximum security, who crossed the finish line first in the 2019 Kentucky Derby before being disqualified. What shocked people was discovering Servis had been doping the horse all along. The FBI had been listening to phone calls for months. Trainers casually discussed which drugs to use on which horses. Veterinarians created custom cocktails to avoid detection. Suppliers bragged about substances so new that labs couldn't test for them. Jorge Navarro called one horse a walking pharmacy. Servis discussed the juice, something powerful enough to make any horse run faster, no matter how injured. 27 people were charged. Navarro got 5 years in prison. Servis got 4 years. Racing fans realized their favorite victories might have been built on animal abuse disguised as training. But even when scandals get exposed, sometimes the biggest shock is who was helping cover them up. In 1974, a small race course in England became the center of a betting conspiracy that fooled the entire racing establishment. The race was at Cartmel Racecourse. The horse was Gay Future, and the plan was so elaborate it took investigators years to unravel. Gay Future wasn't supposed to win anything. He was a mediocre Irish horse with terrible odds. But a group of Irish gamblers had spent months setting up the perfect con. They placed huge bets on Gay Future at betting shops across England, using fake names and coordinated timing. The twist was that Gay Future wasn't even supposed to run in most of his recent races. The conspirators had been entering him in small Irish races, then withdrawing him at the last minute. This kept his odds artificially high, while they secretly improved his fitness and training. On race day at Cartmel, Gay Future ran the race of his life. He came from nowhere to win at odds of 10-1. The payout was enormous, over £300,000, worth millions in today's money. The conspiracy succeeded because the gamblers had exploited every weakness in the betting system. They coordinated their bets perfectly, avoiding detection until it was too late. The small racecourse at Cartmel didn't have the security measures of bigger tracks. Rumors say that some people in the racing establishment should have noticed the unusual betting patterns or questioned Gay Future's sudden improvement. But whether through incompetence or willful blindness, the warnings were missed. The Gay Future scam proved that sometimes the most successful conspiracies don't need inside help. They just need a system too trusting to recognize when it's being played. In 1990, jockey Sylvester Carmouche tried the boldest cheat in racing history. During a race at Delta Downs, thick fog rolled across the track. Carmouche thought the fog would hide his plan. Instead of following the rail, he cut across the infield, taking a much shorter route. When he emerged, landing officer was so far ahead that spectators couldn't believe it. But officials and other jockeys maintained enough visibility to know something was wrong. The other riders swore they'd lost sight of Carmouche completely. When officials studied race footage, the truth was undeniable. Carmouche had literally skipped most of the race. He later admitted cutting the course, believing fog would conceal his shortcut. The victory was reversed. Carmouche got a 10-year ban, but it raised disturbing questions. If someone could attempt such a brazen shortcut and nearly succeed, what other tricks were being used when conditions were just right? In 2010, Aqueduct Racetrack became the center of a political scandal reaching the highest levels of New York government. Multiple companies competed for the lucrative Racino contract worth hundreds of millions, but Aqueduct Entertainment Group won despite having the worst financial bid. How? State Senator John Sampson had been leaking insider details about rival bids to AEG. While other companies submitted bids blindly, AEG knew exactly what they were competing against. The Inspector General found insider favoritism, unethical campaign contributions, and manipulated rules giving connected bidders unfair advantages. The most shocking scandal might be happening right now. During 2018 to 2019, around 50 horses died at Santa Anita Park. Not from old age. They died during races and training, bodies breaking down on tracks supposed to be safe. Officials blamed weather and fragile horses, but investigations revealed many dead horses had been racing with hidden injuries. Veterinary records showed fractures and torn ligaments that should have kept them off tracks completely. Trainers had been masking pain with drug cocktails that made horses unable to recognize danger. Broken bones felt normal. Torn muscles didn't hurt. The horses kept running until their bodies catastrophically failed. Santa Anita's death spike was far higher than the national average, but it exposed how the racing industry balances profit against animal welfare. The scandal forced everyone to ask, when horses die at rates that shock the public, how long can the sport pretend everything is normal?